Your work matters, you amazing unicorn of justice, you. Right? Molly asked me to give a pep talk that was nice and encouraging, which is really good because it's been really hard. And the original title was, Winter is coming and nothing's going to change. It's just hopeless, hopeless, everyone. And so I've decided to take a different approach to the keynote today, okay? So your work matters, you amazing unicorn of justice, you, and there's going to be pictures of baby animals on every single slide. Because Japanese researchers discovered that looking at pictures of baby animals increases your productivity. They are brilliant grant writers because they got a grant to study this. And it's completely true. Okay, so the baby animals, there's baby animals on every slide. They have nothing to do with the content of anything I'm talking about. In fact, I kind of spent too much time looking at pictures of baby animals for this presentation, so there's actually very little content here. So, stuff we'll talk about today. The entire presentation today is basically about how awesome you are. That's really it, right? That's because you spend like 3 days learning stuff and improving yourself and stuff. So the closing is just how amazing you are and how your work is so important. And if we have time, I want to talk about Nonprofit the Musical. That's really about it, okay? But first, a few disclaimers. I have a 6-year-old and a 3-year-old, and I have not slept in 6 years. And you know, having a kid is like getting a multi-year federal grant. At first, you're like, yay! And then you're like, oh God, this is so much work. And you can't put it back. It's just uncomfortable for everyone. So I'm hallucinating a lot. So please, yeah, you don't have to agree with anything that I say, okay? Disclaimer number 2 is that I don't claim to be an expert in anything. I've been an executive director and a fundraiser and a program director, et cetera, for the last 13 years or so. That does not mean that I know what I'm talking about. So please feel free to disagree with anything, okay? It's just that once you write a blog for long enough, someone is going to invite you to Indianapolis to give a keynote speech. Yeah. And disclaimer number 3 is that I don't claim to represent anyone except myself. You know, it's tempting to say, Vu, he's up on stage, he must represent all people of color, or all attractive, intelligent people everywhere. You know, this is just one dude's opinion, okay? Also, I'm still a little bit bitter about season 8 of Game of Thrones, and that's been affecting me a lot. They won an Emmy. Why you are so awesome, right? You are amazing. We are amazing. I'm going to count myself among everyone, okay? Because we're like air. No, for-profits are like food, right? People can see food. So they can take pictures of food and call themselves foodies. And the work that we do is like air. No one really appreciates air until it's gone. No one sees it. No one appreciates the work that we do until it is gone. But we lift up families. We build strong communities. We are the 3rd largest sector. We are 10% of the workforce. And also, Japanese researchers discovered that we are the most attractive professionals among all the sectors. Right? And no one sees this, right? Because we have a serious problem. No one sees us in society at all because we're so invisible, right? And when we are seen in society, it is like these terrible stereotypes. Like if there's a social worker on TV, it's usually someone trying to remove kids from their families, and the kids have to get together and put on a talent show to save the family farm or whatever. You know, like this. These are the stereotypes that we have to come. You know, it's completely unrealistic. Who watches Law & Order: Criminal Intent? Yeah, that's a great show, right? And I was watching an episode, and they were investigating a murder, and they discovered there was a nonprofit that was illegally selling human organs from its basement. This is the perception people have of us. It's greatly exaggerated because no more than 5% of us are illegally selling human organs from our basement. right? And I think we need to do because we're very nice people. We put up with this. And I say no more. We can no longer put up with this stuff, okay? I'm working on a few TV shows that I want to run by you. For example, the amazing free supplies race. So when a bank moves, and they send an email, it's like, hey, you nonprofits, we're moving, and we have all these free supplies and furniture. And then all of us assemble into teams to be the first one to get that sweet chair that we don't have to duct tape together to keep the family of mice from like moving in and stuff, right? Or, dancing with contract monitors. And my favorite, Nonprofit and Afraid. Who watches Naked and Afraid? Okay, Naked and Afraid is a show on the Discovery Channel, so you know it is educational. Takes these two people who are strangers, places them in the wilderness. They get one survival item each. It's like a machete and a fire starter, and they have to survive for 3 weeks. And they have to find their own food and shelter. And I'm thinking we take someone, and they're naked and they're afraid, okay? We take someone from outside the sector, and we place them at a nonprofit. And we videotape their experience, and they get a survival item, and it's like a 1993 Honda Accord. I'm also working on Nonprofit the Musical, which would be so cool. And I'm already thinking of some really cool characters we could have. For example, the consulting robot. It's a robot that is a consultant, and it repeats exactly what the staff says. But the board actually listens to it. And there's a development director character, and it's played by a new actor in every scene. And no one talks about it throughout the entire musical. This is what we do. Right. So we really have to challenge society's perception of our work because it is so suspenseful. Like, are we going to file that $9.90 on time? Is this corporate sponsor going to fill their table at the luncheon, or do we have to pack it with volunteers again? Right? So much material for this work. We got to challenge society's perceptions because we're amazing. Because there's like things that affect our work because of society's perception. Things that are BS, like overhead. Overhead needs to die, right? It's just like, we do not have time to talk about overhead. We need to focus on results, and yet people are still obsessed with this idea of overhead, and we gotta lower, and we use arcane voodoo Excel magic to get the overhead rates down, all this stuff. If your overhead rate is like less than 10%, you're a liar, okay? Stop lying about stuff. And we've been putting up with this BS for too long. Because we're nice people. We're just nice, attractive people, so we put up with this stuff. And we need to just stop. And imagine if a for-profit has to deal with the stuff that we have to deal with. So an example I've been using is like, a bakery. Imagine if there's a bakery, and I'm going to call it the Dusty Apron Organic Gluten-Free Hemp-Based Bakery. Because I live in Seattle, and all of our baked goods are made out of hemp and recycled water bottles. And imagine a customer comes in and says, hey, I want to buy a cake from you. How much would it cost for a cake that serves 20 gluten-free veterans? And we go, oh, it's $50 for this cake. And they go, okay, I'm going to give you $10 because I never pay 100% of any cake. Okay? So you have to go and find other people who care about gluten-free veterans to pay for the rest of this cake. And we go, okay, sure, there's lots of people who care about gluten-free veterans. And then they go, okay, here's my $10, but with this $10, you only buy 1 egg and 1 stick of butter. And no vanilla. Vanilla does not align with my priorities this year. And none of this money can be used for the electricity for your oven because that does not directly benefit gluten-free veterans. This is what we deal with. We're playing with this funding Sudoku every day. And you know who suffers? The gluten-free veterans. They gotta eat like fruit for dessert again. Things have gotten so urgent now. We don't have time to talk about this anymore. So I'm using a new metaphor that I want you all to get. We are like the firefighters putting out the fires of injustice every single day. That's what you do. And imagine if someone comes up to us and while we're putting out a fire, and they go, hey, I want to make sure that the money I'm giving you to put out the fire is being spent on the water and not the hose. What is your hose to water ratio? This is what we deal with. And the more we stop to answer dumbass questions like that, the less time we are spending putting out the fires, which means the fires of injustice are raging on while we're putting up with this stuff. So we need to stop putting up with this stuff, and we need to fight back. Overhead needs to just die completely. That's just something we just don't talk about ever again. The end. Thank you. Because we have other things we got to die, like sustainability. This idea that we nonprofits not only have to do like the work, but also have to sustain it. And it manifests in this question. From a lot of times from funders who go, what are you going to do when this grant that we give you runs out? How will you sustain this program? And all of us have been trained to BS this. We say things like, oh, we will increase the capacity of our board and staff to reach out to individual donors. We will build connections with local businesses, and we will sell the macaroni artwork that the kids in our after-school program make. All of that is a euphemism for we will leave you alone and bother other people for 1 year. And then when you forgot that we applied to you, we will reapply. And in fact, on my blog, you can just go, there's a blog post called Standardized Answers to the Sustainability Question. And there's 9 different versions, just like the long form, and then there's like one that's like 240 characters for some online grants. You can just copy and paste the whole thing. And a colleague from Oregon emailed me and said, Vu, I copy and pasted your medium length form into a grant application and got $25,000. This is not a good question, y'all. Stop wasting time on this. We are cleaning up the messes left over by society. All right, a lot of our work is work that should be done by government. So we are filling out the gaps. We are cleaning up other people's messes. It's like, you go to a party and everyone's like trashed the room and you're starting to clean up and someone's like, how are you paying for this mop? Like, that's what the sustainability question is. And it's insulting to us, the people who are doing this work. Stop putting up with it. We have to tell people that if they care about this work, if they think it's amazing work and they want it to be sustainable, then they need to sustain it. Thank you. Bizsplaining. This is another thing that we have to address. Bizsplaining is like mansplaining, but when a business does it to a nonprofit, as if we didn't know what we were doing. By the way, thank you, corporate sponsors, for bringing me here today. I love you all, okay? Corporations are amazing. I don't know a single nonprofit that distills tequila, so for that, I'm deeply grateful to our for-profit friends, all right? But enough is enough, y'all. We get insulting assumptions that we don't know what we're doing. I get asked questions like, Vu, have you nonprofits heard of this thing we do in for-profit called accounting? Yes. We are the best accountants ever because we play funding Sudoku on a daily basis, okay? We have to be way better because we've internalized this thing where we're trying to be like the for-profit sector. Sometimes we bring in leaders from the for-profit sector, assuming that they know anything about nonprofit, and some of them do become really good leaders. But this assumption that for-profits are better inherently than nonprofit is something we need to fight against, because it's not true at all. Our work is in many ways way more complicated with way more restrictions. And there are major differences. A major difference is that as we become more and more successful, we increase our expenses without an equal increase in revenues. If Apple sells 1 million iPhones this month and next month it sells 2 million iPhones, it doubles its revenues. If we serve 100 kids this month, and next month the program is so great that 200 kids they come to be served, then we double our expenses, and then we have to scramble for funding. That is a major difference. Another one is that we're expected to perform miracles. It's like, we gave you $10,000, why didn't you end poverty last year? It's incredible. And just think about what you do, the miracles you perform every single day with the limited resources that you have. It's breathtaking. Imagine if we go to Apple and we say, hey, Apple, you sold 1 million iPhones last month. That's really great, but that's like an output. That's not really an outcome, Apple. Okay. I want to know, Apple, of the 1 million iPhones you sold, how many people use their iPhones to update their resumes and then applied for jobs with their iPhones? How many people did you help find jobs, Apple? Or how many seniors fell and broke their ankle and then used their iPhone to go onto WebMD and learn how to foster a tourniquet for their broken ankle? And so they did not go to the emergency room, and so they saved taxpayers' money. How much in taxpayers' money did you save, Apple? Right? I had an executive director friend of mine from a senior hot meal program called and said, Vu, I'm tired. I want to quit this sector. It's like, what's going on? She said, this program officer from a foundation came and to tour, and she asked, how many people do you serve with hot meals? And I said, well, we serve 900 seniors a week with hot meals. And the program officer said, that's really great. What are your outcomes? And my friend is like, well, 900 seniors come in hungry and they leave full. Right? Is that not a good enough outcome? But no, we've been trained. So she's like, but I had to give all this BS about how feeding seniors means that they are less likely to fall and break their legs and go to the emergency room and save taxpayers money. Plus, crime rates have been decreased because bands of roving hungry seniors have been robbing banks. And it's like, this is what we are dealing with. It's amazing, right? There is a company called Juicero. Juicero, who's heard of Juicero? It is a Wi-Fi connected juicing machine. It costs $700. You buy these proprietary packets of juice of cut up vegetables. You put it into the machine. It squeezes out 1 glass of juice per $7 packets. And Bloomberg did an investigation where they just squeezed the packets by hand and got the same amount of juice, but faster. So then they wrote about it, and the company tanked. But before they did, they were boasting that they had $135 million in venture capital. They had 50 full-time engineers working on this Wi-Fi connected juicing machine. Can you imagine what any of our organizations could do with $135 million? The amount of justice and equity we could achieve if we had the same level of trust and investment as the for-profit sector does. Bitmoji is an app that turns you. Who uses Bitmoji? Yeah, it's an app that turns you into a little cartoon, and then you paste these little cartoons into your text messages, and then you text your wife while she's at work, and then she texts back like, please stop texting me while I'm at work. That's Bitmoji, and it got $8 million in venture funding, $8 million, while we have homeless veterans out there. Society's priorities are completely warped, and we have been trained to just put up with it because we're nice people. And we need to stop. We have to, we can appreciate our for-profit friends, but stop the Bizsplaining. We gotta stop, all right? We are just as amazing, and we need to own that. Because we've been developing this nonprofit inferiority complex. It's true. Whenever someone asks you, what do you do? Many of us will say, I work for this little nonprofit, blah, blah, blah. No, you don't. You are saving lives. You are strengthening families. You are building community. That's what you do every single day. You're not just working at a small nonprofit. All right, we have to get out of this. We have the scarcity and martyrdom complex. S&M, Scarcity and Martyrdom. No more S&M. Half of you are sitting on chairs, crappy chairs. Who's happy with your chair? Who's happy with your chair? All right? Your overhead's too high. Yeah. I had a friend who had a chair that was so bad, but it was like hurting her back, and she refused to get a chair, a new chair, because she did not want to increase her overhead rates, and her board had to make a motion and vote on her to force her to get a chair. We have to get out of this mindset, y'all. The scarcity mindset. You deserve a nice chair to sit on while you change the world. Our staff deserve decent pay and paid family leave and retirement. We have to stop joking about retirement. It's been a joke for many of us in the sector. It's like, what are you going to do for retirement? I plan to just die in the climate war. Like, this is not a good thing, right? No. We're out of the scarcity martyrdom mindset, okay? All right, what do we need to do? First, you gotta own your awesomeness. You are amazing, right? You are amazing. I want that to sink in. We have to invest in our people, right? Our people should not qualify for the services that our organizations provide. We've got to build community, all right? This is probably one of the biggest, most important things that we do, that you do, and that is not recognized because, again, it's like air. People don't just come to our programs because they want a hot meal or whatever. They come because there's a sense of community. One of the most important things ever is the sense of belonging. And we just kind of take it for granted. We don't put it into our logic models and our theories of change. But this is probably the most important thing that you do for everyone, is you build community. We have to embrace race, equity, access, diversity, and inclusion. I know Professor Hardy talked about this. I just want to reinforce this. It is critical, and our sector has to lead in this. We have to talk about race. Because in many ways, we've been avoiding talking about racism and poverty, the link between the two and everything else. And I think that we need to, right? And our sector has to be the leader in this. And I know it can be uncomfortable, but I think this is the work of our sector moving forward. Just 2 nights ago, I was talking to a group of development directors, and it was a more difficult conversation. And I was like, you can thank these donors for the gift that they're giving, but maybe it might be good for you to start to get them to think about that maybe their family's wealth came from slavery, and maybe they need to give this money back. And it's not really a gift, and it's more like reparation. And I know that is way more challenging, but I think this is our sector moving forward. We have to embrace these uncomfortable conversations, because how are we going to achieve social justice otherwise? But I don't think it has to be that uncomfortable. I think we need to embrace the discomfort, but we also need to we need to normalize these conversations. So I'm a big fan of Jay Smooth's philosophy of talking about race, which is that we need to get out of this tonsillectomy model talking about racism, where it's like you attend one workshop on undoing racism, and it's like you got your racist tonsils removed, and then you can never be racist again. And then when someone says, hey, yeah, you said something that was kind of problematic, and then they go, how dare you? I attended an undoing racism workshop 3 years ago, and I can never be racist ever again. No, Jay Smooth recommends we move towards this dental hygiene model talking about racism, where we look in the mirror every single day, and we brush and floss daily. And when someone says, hey, you got a little bit of racism stuck in your teeth, we go, oh, that's embarrassing. Thank you for pointing this out. I really appreciate that. I'm going to go look in the mirror, and I'm going to go floss this bit of racism out. Right? Wouldn't you want people to tell you when you have something stuck in your teeth? Otherwise, you're just going to have stuff in your teeth, and you're just going to walk out and be all embarrassing all day because you refuse to look in the mirror, okay? So we just need to normalize it because we all are going to make mistakes all the time. Not just about race, but about everything, about disability, about transgender identity, about LGBTQ identities, and neurodiversity. I've been making all sorts of mistakes about these things. I was making fun of Comic Sans, for example. Comic Sans is a laughable font, right? It's terrible. Until I realized that it actually helps people with dyslexia. So people with dyslexia like Comic Sans because it makes it easier to read for them. So we had to be way thoughtful about these things. We still have many practices that we do when we talk about equity, and yet we still do these terrible things. Like, for example, putting in, you must be able to lift 50 pounds in your job posting. How many of us have lifted 50 pounds? I'm a vegan. I can barely lift my arms right now. Okay? Or how many of us, we still don't disclose salary ranges in our job posts, and we need to do that, right? Or we punish candidates who don't have formal degrees, instead of really prioritizing candidates who have the lived experience and the language skills. And we need to do a way better job. I have been an ED for a long time, and I can tell you, you do not need a bachelor's degree to be an executive director. You just need a high threshold for pain and chaos. So we got to move out of this mindset, and we got to embrace race, equity, access, diversity, and inclusion. READY, I think that's the acronym. We got to be bolder and louder, right? We put up with a lot of BS from donors and from funders and foundations, and I think we just need to stop. We don't have time for this, right? I was having a conversation with a grant maker who said, "Vu, you keep criticizing us all the time about the strategies we set. Well, what strategies do you recommend that we set?" And I said, "Why do you think you have any right to set any strategies at all? What gives you the power to set strategies? You don't do any of the work, right? Why? You have money. Does that give you any authority to set strategies when it's the people on the ground who are working, who should know the community better and should be better and better experts to set these strategies that you should fund?" That was an awkward conversation. And we need to embrace this. We have to embrace this because I'm tired of all of these things that we put up with. There's only so much money to go around. That is bullshit. Stop accepting that there's only so much money to go around. Foundations give out 5% in payout. That means 95% of funding is just sitting there. Just sitting there, being hoarded while there are kids in cages. It is unethical. And it's unethical for us to keep putting up with it. Wealthy individuals pay less in taxes. So this whole philosophy of, it's their money. They get to do whatever they want. They get to give whoever they want. That's also BS. If people are not paying their fair share of taxes, it is not their money. So be louder, be bolder, push back on many of these things. We've got to challenge established norms. We just kind of accept some of these norms as these are best practices. Who are they best for? Like the boards, for example. There are some amazing board members like Molly and others, right, who are brilliant and great. But I would probably say there's a lot of dysfunctional boards out there. I have a rule of 1/3, which is 1/3 of boards are useful and helpful, 1/3 are completely useless, and 1/3 are actually destructive to their organizations, right? So that means 2/3 of boards are pretty useless or destructive. Please don't tweet this. My board might read this. my board's in the first 1/3. So, yeah. But if you really think about it, what are the legal requirements for a board? Is that you have 3 board members who meet once a year to file taxes. Everything else is a convention that we pass down. And conventions can be changed. They are not set in stone, right? So and we have to really embrace this, because otherwise we just put up with ineffective practices instead of figuring out how to change them. And that applies to everything, to evaluation, to fundraising, all of it, right? And it perpetuates things like the nonprofit Hunger Games, where we're just fighting with one another for resources all the time. That has to end. Because winter is here. This is a Game of Thrones reference, right? In Game of Thrones, which is a really good show until season 5. But there's like all of these, like these families, they're fighting for resources and power, and then there are the wildlings. The wildlings are like the sort of savage people who are uncivilized and they don't have Wi-Fi, and it's just like sad. And there's a wall that divides them, it's like this giant ice wall, right? And then, but in Game of Thrones, like all of these ice zombies are coming. They're going to kill everyone while people are fighting for power and resources and keeping the wildling out. The ice zombies are coming. And I think that's what we have to focus on. Oftentimes, we nonprofits feel like we're the wildlings, just banging on the doors of foundations or donors and saying, please give us multi-year general operating funds, whatever, right? And we have to focus on the bigger picture, which is that there are ice zombies of poverty and racism and injustice. And it's been a lot of that these last few years. I was talking to a friend of mine who is a family support worker. She was doing a home visit, and she said that she got into this single mom's house or apartment, and all the curtains were drawn. And as her eyes adjusted, she saw all these numbers that were printed up and taped onto the wall. And she said, what's going on? What's with all these numbers? And the mom said, well, these are numbers, telephone numbers of my friends that I want my 6-year-old to memorize in case I don't come home one day because of deportation. Like, this is what we are dealing with now. So much of it. We don't have time to doubt ourselves anymore. We don't have time to be quiet. We don't have time to be deferential. We don't have time to put up with BS like overhead and sustainability and Bizsplaining. We don't have time to put up with the scarcity and martyrdom complex. We don't have time to put up with our own sense of inferiority, because we are Jedi Unicorns. We're not just unicorns, we're Jedi Unicorns. We restore balance to the Force. That's what you do. People ask me, Vu, what's with you in the unicorn thing? I'll tell you a quick story. I got my master's in social work, and then no one would hire me because I had no experience. And I found this freelance writing gig for a company called Bella Sera. It made card games aimed at girls aged 5 to 12. And you buy these cards, and there are unicorns on them, and there's a code. And you use the code to unlock your unicorn in this virtual world. And you take your unicorn around, and you talk to other unicorns, and you go on these little quests to teach the unicorns about love and friendship and community, and you grow things in your unicorn garden. And I wrote the dialogue for these unicorns. I would write things like, hey, Sparkle Wing, would you grow me a moonflower? The company tanked 6 months after I was hired. But it made me realize that we are the unicorns that we seek. We're the ones going out there, teaching people about love and friendship and building community. That's what you do every single day. And I think we think of iconic leaders like Mother Teresa and MLK Jr., but I think behind all these iconic leaders are all the people who are just unsung heroes, right? Who are, I don't know, taking meeting minutes and planning conferences and talking to someone and writing case notes and stuff. Like, these major changes cannot happen without the millions of small changes that you do every single day. And because even though society society doesn't really appreciate us. And sometimes the people that we help, actually, we may not hear from them. We may not hear thank you from them. And sometimes it's because they don't have the language skills. I got here when I was 8 from Vietnam. My father fought against the communists, and he was put into re-education camp. And then we left. And we were in Philadelphia. And I remember this because it was really cold, and all the houses were lit up with Christmas lights, which I had never seen before. So my brothers and I, we would walk around the neighborhood and look at the Christmas lights because we had nothing else. We couldn't speak the language. We had no TV back then. And one day we discovered a string of Christmas lights someone had tossed in the garbage. And we dragged that home and taped it up. I remember that day because we plugged it in and somehow half of the lights lit up, which was a miracle. And I remember that moment because I thought, we're Americans now. We have our own Christmas lights. It was really rough back then. And besides the Christmas lights, I looked forward to a refrigerator that we had. We had a refrigerator. And I would try to make ice. So I would put little bowls of ice, of water in the refrigerator. And every day I would come home from school where I didn't understand anything at all to look in and check in to see if my bowls of water had turned into ice. Right? They never did because I didn't realize that at the time, but there was a freezer section above my head. And that's where you make the ice, so, right? And I remember school was really rough. It was hard. I got lost once because I took the wrong bus stop. And I was wandering around downtown Philly by myself. And my parents told me, if you ever get lost, you stand by this payphone. Remember those payphones? You stand by this payphone. Here's a quarter I taped into your notebook and with the names and addresses of people, of our friends. If you ever get lost, stand by a payphone and try to use this quarter to call one of our friends. And I didn't know how a payphone worked. So I stood there and waited, and with my quarter held out like this, waiting for someone to come by to help me. And there was a lady who came by eventually. And she used her own quarter to call my parents' friends, and they came to pick me up. And I tried to pay her back the quarter, and she didn't take it. They came to pick me up. But my mother had been waiting for me at the bus stop. And when I didn't get there, she was in this panic. Can you imagine a mother, not seeing her kid who doesn't speak, and neither one of them speaks any English. Somehow she got onto the bus and demanded that the bus driver drive around the city looking for me. That was not a good day when I got home first and she came home later. But I think this is kind of what it's been like. It's like so many of us we're like bowls of water in the fridge, just trying to feel solid. And so many parents just send their kids off to school hoping that they'll come back every day. The toughest thing about being in the United States those days was that we had lost our sense of community. Everyone we knew was gone. And the thing that made it better were people like you, all these nonprofits that stepped in and brought us food and warm clothing and got me and my brothers registered for school and got my parents jobs. And because of that, it inspired me to go and get my social work degree so I can pay it forward. And maybe the work that you do, because there's so much work to do that you don't see just how important it is. You don't see the ripple effects. Because maybe one of the kids you helped may not have the language skills yet to come back and thank you for it. So I want to let you know as you get back to work that your work matters because it helps people like me and my family and it inspires us to pay it forward and create a better community. And even if you don't see it because our work is invisible, your work is invisible, it is deeply appreciated and it makes a difference. Thank you.